All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. I'm Danielle Patterson, CEO of Family Office Access, and I appreciate you joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. We're going to be breaking down donor advised funds in practical terms. DAFs work because they're simple. You contribute assets, take that deduction, recommend grants over time, but the real value is alignment, government, purpose, measurable outcomes, all on one track. So today we're going to break this down. We've got four incredible experts to share their insights. During today's conversation, the whole reason we hold these things live is so that you can join in the conversation. Feel free, drop a hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining the live stream from, and give us your questions throughout. We'll do our best to incorporate those into today's conversation. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We've got our first expert speaker, Blue Thomas. He's the co-founder of Daffodil, engineer, operator turned product leader, focused on reducing friction in philanthropic capital flows. He's a veteran of complex systems and early stage company building, very passionate about social impact education. Welcome, Blue. Next, I'd like to introduce Sarah Angello, who is also the co-founder of Daffodil. She's an advisor and product builder, helping families and their advisors treat giving as a strategic discipline. She leads Daffodil's mission control approach to DAF setup, governance, and reporting, certified donor fund professional from the American College of Financial Services. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thanks, Danielle. We're looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise. Next, we'll introduce Alex Huff, co-founder of DAFshare. He's a tech entrepreneur with over 20 years in crowdfunding, community building, and gamification, building donor communities for over 1.8 million nonprofits with integrated financial and communications rails. He's an advisor across conservation and sustainable tech. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
Finally, we will welcome Steve Snider, co-founder of DAFshare. He's a finance and marketing entrepreneur with over 30 years turning ideas into companies, certified manager of innovation, member foundations of humane technology. Welcome, Steve. So here we are. Really looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you all for being valued members of the Family Office Access community, and thanks for dedicating your time to help our community learn about DAFs, something I personally am very interested in. So I've really been looking forward to our conversation. And I think to set the baseline, it would be nice, I just kind of scratched on your experience. Maybe we can just go through and maybe starting with you, Blue, tell us a little bit about how you fell into this world of DAFs, just kind of your journey that's led you to being the co-founder of Daffodil.
Sure. About 6 years ago, I joined another early stage startup that was focused on capacity building for nonprofits, and we worked with a lot of foundations. It was during that journey that I really got to understand sort of friction points in nonprofit engagement, nonprofit success, jobs to be done, pain points around the nonprofits in the sector. And like the overwhelmingly largest pain point is financial capacity, right? Above all, right? Nothing runs without money at nonprofits. So just digging in further, like what are some of the conduits that exist for charitable capital flow? And donor advised funds are this sort of vehicle that have been around since the 1930s, but have like grown tremendously in popularity since like 2016, I believe. And it seemed like a really interesting way to sort of learn how to sort of reduce frictions in that capital flow. So I just went on a deep dive, and Sarah was a colleague of mine at that company too. So we both just started really kind of like going deep on donor advised funds and what are some of the friction points and the opportunities that are in that ecosystem. That's how it started.
Well, I love it. Thanks for sharing your journey, and also kind of telling us a little bit more about how your path intersected with Sarah. So Sarah, I'd love to hear how you got involved in this work.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. So I came to this work from a different side of the table. I was a fundraiser for about 15 years. I worked with some large nonprofits, some small nonprofits, all different mission areas, really all across the country. And during that time, I worked with individuals, families, foundations on transforming their capital, their capacity to give, and their interest in supporting great organizations, and moving that interest in giving into real change and real donations that had a big impact to organizations doing great work. So along that journey, I began seeing donor advised funds becoming the preferred vehicle of so many philanthropists and so many individuals and families. And DAFs themselves just began to grow so exponentially. So as a fundraiser, I saw this was a huge need for really bridging that gap between organizations that are so eager to receive this type of financial support and families and individuals who are ready to put that capital to impact. So after I left my work in fundraising, I started working in tech for good, where I overlapped with Blue and our third co-founder, who was also an executive there. And we saw that DAFs are something that we could really supercharge with better technical solutions to move that capital with impact and visibility.
Wow. I love your journey, and your passion is so evident, and it's just incredible to see how you're taking that experience in fundraising for nonprofits and really leveraging the tech and bridging the gap. It's awesome.
I've been a big time DAF nerd for quite a while, so it's exciting to be in this conversation with people who want to talk DAFs. So
I know. I think we've got like 4 DAF nerds all together. We're going to geek out. So Alex, share with us, how did you join this collection of DAF nerds?
Yep. Well, I actually started around, I'd say, turn of the century even, where I was in the tech space and doing consulting work and helped a company that did very complex gifts around it, define an entire digital strategy when, printing was the game, which, has changed considerably. But from there, I've been on every side of kind of the ecosystem, from donor to started a couple of charities to volunteering and be putting in those fundraiser shoes and so forth. So as things progressed, and even my kind of path through crowdfunding led me to have the idea of like peer-to-peer fundraising, et cetera, which, everything changed with the Jobs Act and things like that. And while we were kind of fighting against some of the regulatory hurdles, DAFs were taking off. And so I really got into DAFs with some of the big DAFs and getting to know them and seeing them not just as this sort of giving wallet, but as a financial vehicle that we felt was being underutilized. So we've sort of re-engineered what we see as a DAF to make it more portable, shareable, and just more effective at building communities of donors.
Very cool. I love your unique perspective, really knowing it inside out from all different angles. And that brings us to you, Steve. Excited to hear a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My journey begins really in childhood, to be honest. My parents had me involved in philanthropy as a kid, taking me to Habitat for Humanity, projects and March of Dimes and food drives and things like that. And I kind of continued that into adulthood, was involved in a lot of different charities just as a volunteer over the years. Then I had the opportunity to serve on a foundation board, which I did for about 14 years, and really dug into a lot of the issues that, the challenges that were happening in that world, and the disconnect between donors and charities, and the lack of knowledge about technology and things of that nature. And then about 3 years ago, I ran into this guy named Alex through a mutual connection, and he told me about this exciting project he was working on involving DAFs. And my first question is, what is a DAF? So I was in the same boat as a lot of people out there right now, trying to figure out what this is all about. So I got to use my experience in the challenges in the charitable world, and now we're working to try to solve those problems. So
amazing. Well, so honored to have all of you here, and love the journey that has led us to today's conversation. And to really set some context for the audience, I just thought, let's start at the beginning. Let's set the baseline and really get an understanding of the term DAF. And from our earlier conversations, what I understand is just like the word family office, that really can mean so many different things to different people depending on the context. And the way that you said it, they first appeared in like the early 1900s, how I'm sure it's really evolved. So I'd love to hear from each of you, just kind of in the work you do, what a DAF really means. And maybe we'll start with you, Blue, just kind of a plain English definition and why a family might choose a DAF over using a foundation.
It's a bank account. I just try to like break it down to the most basic principle. It's an account you put money into, and you get a tax benefit by doing that. So it's a legal construct.
Okay.
The custodian of that account needs to be a 501c3, a compliant 501c3 of the United States, because that's where you get your tax benefit from. And then you have an agreement with that organization that allows you to advise or recommend how it gets deployed. A deployment to other U.S. charities. I think that you're limited to that from a philanthropic deployment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can also you can also grow it and through investment vehicles, and that can look like ETFs or other types of portfolios, or some like crazier venture stuff that other custodians and sponsors allow you to do. Not everybody allows you to do that, but in a nutshell, it's basically a super easy, flexible accounting structure that allows you to allocate funds for charity at the time you do it, and then figure out what to do with it later. There's no limit. There's no time limit on or threshold for deployment. So that's kind of where some of the controversy comes from, but also the flexibility, and why entities like family offices would choose something like that is they're just super easy to set up. You lose control, but the overhead in setting them up and then deploying capital on your own time is what you gain from it. So there's a time and a place.
Awesome. Thank you, Blue. Thank you for just kind of breaking it down to its basics. And Sarah, over to you. I know that you often have to explain this to families who are maybe already doing philanthropic work through foundations or direct grants, or maybe, mission-aligned investments. But how do you explain a DAF to them?
Yeah, great question. And, DAFs have been around for almost 100 years. They've been formally codified with the IRS for about 50 at this point, but there is a very clear baseline definition that we're all in agreement in. And just to echo what Blue was sharing there, a donor advised fund, also called a DAF, it's a charitable giving account that allows donors to make contributions, receive an immediate tax deduction, and recommend grants to nonprofits over time. And once funds are contributed to that DAF, which is held by a DAF sponsor, those funds can only be distributed for charitable purposes. And different DAF sponsors have different guidelines about that, but that's really the heart and soul of what to know about the definition of a DAF.
Love it. Thank you, guys. Alex, so you had said something that kind of stuck with me since in one of our prep calls, and you said that friends don't live friends, give cash. And elaborate on what you're thinking there, and really what it says about how gift giving has changed.
Yeah, well, and especially in the sort of world we're living at, where we've got our first $5 trillion company, we've got Bitcoin over 100K, we've got some hugely appreciated assets for smart investors. When you are finally going to lock in some of your gains and sell some of that, you're obviously going to get taxed for that.
Right.
And a good way to offset that is to donate those shares prior to the sale. Because if you look at, we have an advisor that is a brilliant financial mind that works with us, and he's even broken it down to show if you sell it and then give the cash that you make from the sale after the tax, if you just give the stock to a nonprofit, and where DAFs make that easy is you don't have to give it all to one nonprofit, so you're building your assets, and a lot of times you can even hold those assets and have them continue to appreciate and just sell off what you're going to give away. And doing so is something between a 25 and 35% gain on the amount of charitable assets that you have as a result. And I think for me too, just to kind of go back to the DAF question or definition,
Yeah.
to me, it's easiest to think of it as it's really just a charity. You could give it all to a charity. You could stay in communication on what they're going to do with it. They could give it to another charity. and they're going to invest that money. The difference is you get to make all those decisions, because typically charities are not great investment people, are not the ones that are going to fund other charities. So it lets you keep control of it and make those smart decisions, like giving gifts of any type of assets as opposed to directly giving cash.
Love it. Thank you. Wow. And Steve, anything from your own personal experience you'd like to add to, kind of this definition of a DAF, the way you see it working, maybe the way it's building kind of community around philanthropic giving?
Well, from a technical standpoint, I always like to look at it in terms of how it compares to private foundations, which is a more traditional route that a lot of family offices have taken. And it's just a lot simpler to set up, a lot less expensive to maintain as well. Accountants, lawyers, all that sort of thing. So you're basically outsourcing the back office to somebody else. It simplifies the whole process from a family standpoint. And that's not to say that there's not a role for private foundations. There are.
Right.
But I mean, private DAFs have been growing at roughly 20% per annum for the last 10 years, year on year. They're not as, the assets are maybe a fourth or a fifth of what private foundations are, but I think it's reasonable to expect that within a foreseeable future that donor advised funds will actually have more assets under management than private foundations will. And that's the reason.
Wow. Amazing. I love to see the way it's building momentum, and excited to really dive into why in our conversation. So thank you all for just helping break it down. So now that we've kind of got our baseline, let's really learn where these DAFs work beautifully, but also maybe where some people are getting tripped up. So we obviously really want to focus on the positives, but good to hear some of the pitfalls as well. So let's start, with you, Sarah. Beyond tax, what are the admin wins that families notice right away? Some of just the major benefits with a DAF.
Great question. Can build on a little bit of what Steve said there. Right away, there are wins in time and capacity and ease and simplicity. So a family foundation has a lot of requirements. So if you are setting one of those up for a family that you're working with, there are board meeting requirements, there are annual distributions, there are filings. There's a lot of different ways that you need to think about involving different people. You need a clear mission statement of what that foundation is doing. Whereas a DAF really frees you up in terms of the capacity that you have of the administration required. Mm-hmm. You put the assets and move the resources into the donor advised fund, and then you're really free to make some decisions on your own timeline. That can be involving different members of a family. A DAF does not have a board of directors, so you can use this as a way for different family members to pursue different interests. You can explore a lot of different options that way, different mission areas, and do that without the disclosure requirements, the board meetings that are necessary for a foundation, and a lot of those similar requirements.
Wow. Yeah. It just sounds so easy. It's so practical, makes so much sense. Yes. I'm curious, Blue, from your perspective, obviously there's a lot of ease in setting it up. How do advisors feel about this? Do they like that ease, or is it kind of threatening their role in working with the families?
This is a really good question. I've had a lot of conversations with different types of advisors over the last 18 months about this. Yeah. It's usually their advice to their client to open up a donor advised fund. There's like a particular reason within that tax year to do so. Mm-hmm. And that's an advisor advising maybe an individual or a small family. For a family office, there's usually more strategic reason, right? If you need to allocate funds from the foundation, if there's a foundation, towards something so that you can do different types of charitable strategic giving that's maybe outside the charter of the foundation. That's one way to do it. And an important note on that is you can't bring funds from a DAF back into the foundation. So that's a bit of a one-way street. But back to advisors, they embrace the flexibility in that it's a wealth preservation or tax mitigation strategy. Yeah. Most advisors that still operate on the fee model will prefer that these donor advised funds live within a custodian that they're already managing other accounts with. That's a big sort of like convenience driver of the advisor.
Wow.
But there's been this new wave of sort of flat rate advisors that don't want to be sort of motivated by assets under management so much.
Yeah.
And more towards around like not only just wealth preservation, but ancillary services around like how they support their clients. And
Yeah.
they're the ones that have sort of embraced different donor advised fund type of platforms that add value in other ways, and care less about the sort of like assets under management based fee structure that would benefit them.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing to see just the unique approach that each family with its advisors involved can take. Steve, curious to hear from you. We've heard this common critique that often the money can just sit idle, and I imagine that's fair, but can you explain like what can help change that? What helps get the money going?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, donor advised funds don't have to distribute that money, but they actually do a better job than foundations do.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, I think overall, on average, foundations they distribute about a third of the percentage of their assets that donor advised funds do. I think about 23% on average per year. So it's possible that donor advised funds, just basically accumulate assets, but that's not really what happens in reality. But really, for us, the key is finding, donor advised funds are a very powerful tool, very flexible, but there's all kinds of other potential that we've discovered, and I think Daffodil has found the same thing. The key for us is to make it more personal, more social, more fun. A typical donor advised fund now, you enter a dollar amount in, you find the charity, and you push send, and that money goes off, and it's basically like bill pay. But donor advised funds have so much more potential than that, to make it a social, engaging experience, to make it human, which is what the beauty of giving is. It's a human act.
Yeah.
It's one of the most fundamental human acts. And so we're trying to find ways to make the technology mimic human behavior, and so that the satisfaction, the motivations are multiplied. Our mission is to accelerate charitable giving.
Yeah.
If we can do that through technology, it becomes more scalable, and if it can become fun and engaging and impactful at the same time, then everybody wins.
Yeah. Well, and I love Sarah brought up earlier, like how it's very easy because you can have that next generation think about where they want to allocate their philanthropic funds towards. And I love, Steve, I mean, even in your own journey of how you got to this, it was through, as a child, learning how to give back. And so that's great, a great way to just kind of build those values amongst the different generations, but to make it fun, make it meaningful. There is a two-part question from the audience. Thank you, Sumit, for being here. You're an awesome participant of so many of our live streams. I cannot use my private foundation to have a DAF arm. Oh, can I not use my private foundation to have a DAF arm? Great question.
I'm happy to answer that one, or if we all want to chime in. But I think kind of the spirit of this question is, can you use your private foundation to contribute to a donor advised fund? And generally speaking, the answer is yes. There are many foundations that offload assets to a DAF, especially when they want to meet their 5% payout rule in years where perhaps they don't have a clear strategy mapped out, or they're not quite sure how they want to do some deployment of assets and grant distributions. So that private foundations, family foundations, etc., working closely with the DAF is actually really common, and something that we're starting to see a lot more of. A lot of families, especially as there's kind of a passing of the torch between generations, are transitioning from family foundations into a donor advised fund that's held by the family instead. So that is increasingly common and something that we're seeing quite often.
Very cool. Anyone want to add to that? Yeah, I
would love to add to that, because one of the things that we've seen, and we're partnering with another technology company, but money becoming more mobile just because of technology. I've actually seen where, depending on what the budgets are for either giving to a certain segment, could be again, like Sarah said, the 5%, that's fine. But even just, hey, I want to deploy this money. I've got a timeline to do it. I want to know the tax implications. I want to know the carryover rules. I want to do all that. By deploying that through a DAF, it makes it so much simpler, because you may have a segment where you want to give to 12 different nonprofits and you want to do it on a certain schedule. And now it's getting really complicated. But that easy transition of just saying, here's my budget for this area, that's going to be put in a DAF. And here's my budget for another area. I'm going to create a completely different DAF for that. And it's getting easy enough where you can do that with a few clicks. Whereas before it was long legal agreements.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime commitment. You recontribute to the same DAF for your entire life. And now it's, to me, I equate it to sort of thinking you'd have an old school checking account versus a Venmo account.
Wow. Wow.
I can use my money in different ways, and I can just make it simpler, because that's a budget that I'm going to manage. And once I do it, I'm done. Now I can decide when those grants are deployed. I can do it more strategically. And frankly, to the charities, get more value from it. I think you've got a lot of, especially larger family offices, they're not a giving wallet. They're a perpetual giving machine if done right. Yeah. And I know a lot of charities would just say, give us all the money. I know capacity building, deployment, we're using these terms, but the reality is they're managed by very good, very aggressive, and oftentimes have access to investments that retail investors don't. You do that right, you give away so much every year, you will give that away 6 generations from now. Whereas if it's just a checking account, when it's zero, it's done.
Right. Wow. So compelling. All right. Anyone want to contribute before I go on to Sumit's part 2? All right, here we go. And if I can donate prior to selling my share from a trust, how would that affect my DAF?
Could you ask him to define share?
Selling shares from a trust.
I think I get the spirit of the question here. So if you donate before selling shares, and then those shares are contributed to your DAF rather than selling them first, typically when you're donating appreciated assets directly to a DAF, that's when you can typically avoid paying capital gains tax on the appreciation. So this is the type of thing where you want to work closely with the financial advisor and make sure that you're timing and moving those funds on the right timeline with all the right information. But this can be a really smart strategy to ensure that your strategic philanthropy is part of a broader tax mitigation plan.
Amazing.
There is another side to that too, because I know it's not all DAFs will do it, but some DAFs will do things like take private stock. Like even if you have a company and an LOI and you're potentially going to sell the company, there are a lot of legal provisions behind it on buyback rules and liquidity rules and all that. So certainly work with an attorney and or a very good financial advisor. But even if you have sort of illiquid shares of something that do have a path to exit or a path to cash value, you can do that with a DAF as well, just to cover the other side of that potential question, because it could have gone either way.
Yeah. Awesome. So I know you brought up, Sarah, just the advisor role. And I know that one of the things the advisors have to do is communicate and present the information, and families, especially now with all this technology, are kind of requiring more visibility into the outcomes. And I'm curious to hear from any of you. Maybe I'll throw this one your way, Blue. What are you really seeing right now in terms of being able to create visibility for advisors into where their funds are going?
We're employing a lot of technology to be able to do that, and that's driven by this next generation of donors. Mm-hmm. These are the people that are in new seats at grant making organizations too, but mostly donors, where they are less interested in giving money to the organization and more interested in giving money towards causes and impactful programs where they're most passionate about. So it's that's primary and the organization is secondary. So there's this accountability gap in the tooling and just sort of like the practitioners at nonprofits that aren't fulfilling that, just because they haven't had to do so, and because a lot of like the incumbent reporting mechanisms were built for the old guard, right? The old way of like measuring nonprofit performance based on like a percentage of operational budget to revenue, all that stuff is less important with this next generation of philanthropists. So what do we do about that, right? Every organization out there has a story to tell. Larger organizations tell their story the best. So if you're going off of like existing tools or existing public storytelling feeds, you are going to be drawn towards the organizations that have the budget already. And then and that's kind of like there's a false dichotomy there. If you want to be more impactful and give your dollars to where it can deliver the most impact that you care about, you're only hearing from organizations where your dollar is going to go less further than the organizations that would use it more and maybe you would feel better about. So that's something that we feel strongly about at Daffodil. And it's one of the primary reasons why we built out our nonprofit network and our zero burden impact capture mechanism, was to help every nonprofit organization tell a story and get their story and their programmatic data and the outcomes that they're achieving to everybody in the same way.
Wow. And I'm sure with that visibility, do you find lots of opportunity for collaboration? Are there a lot of groups that maybe didn't know about each other that are kind of trying to achieve the same purpose? I'd love to see the inside of Daffodil.
Yeah, some people call that like collective impact. There's some Stanford Social Innovation Review articles about collective impact as a strategy with some third-party facilitation. But just generally, yeah, there's tons of opportunities. If you think of like granting in a cause area as like a pie, you might have multiple organizations that have different strengths that could complement each other, and they don't have to think of themselves up as all competing for the same pie. They can, like, if they knew about each other and their strengths and weaknesses, and there's some kind of facilitation mechanism, either third party or organic, then yeah, there's lots of opportunity there that we're only now starting to be able to uncover by kind of like putting all the data in one place. And then we actually have what we call a synergy report that we can do at an aggregate level to sort of identify a lot of those opportunities and feed those back to the organizations for some actionable items.
Wow. Well, I'm so curious. Maybe Sarah, walk me through what the user experience, a user of Daffodil, what's that like? What do they come to you for, and how do you solve those issues that you solve?
I love that question, Danielle, because I see that it's responding to some of this activity that we have going on in the chat about what are some newer ways that people are using DAFs and what are some innovation that's happening in that space. So one thing that we really focus on crafting and solving for the individuals and entities that come to us for their DAF solutions is we put transparency and impact right at the forefront of every transaction where they work with us. So Daffodil works with, all 1.9 million nonprofits in the US, as well as fiscally sponsored organizations. So any entity that can receive charitable capital, when those deployments happen through Daffodil, through our payment rails, through our compliant process, there is immediate impact visibility, so that the donor, anyone who's moving that charitable capital, they are getting a personalized impact digest from data that we are collecting directly and consistently from the nonprofit, that's providing the regular insights into what that capital is really doing. It's something that we've been really excited to launch, and it's ensuring that your philanthropy isn't going into a black box. Like Blue was saying, trust and transparency is so critical to donors today. And a once a year report or just a quick survey a year later really doesn't cut it for today's philanthropic investors. So those users who are coming to Daffodil, they have this ongoing visibility into their charitable giving that we are excited to lead with and grow with and really work with them to deliver.
Incredible. And would you say that most users come with the intent of, I want to give to this organization, or do they find the organizations through Daffodil?
Kind of a combination. A lot of DAF holders have some sort of charitable impulse already. It's how they know about DAFs. There's some sort of philanthropic insight. But where we come in is a lot of that matchmaking. Right. Folks come to us, they set their cause areas, they define, what their interests are. And through our matchmaking and what we're able to deliver, we can match them to organizations having great impact that perhaps they've never heard of before. We have a discovery fund that helps solve for this and matches donors and their capital to causes that we think are putting them to incredible impact right away.
Wow. Is there a minimum amount that people have to contribute through
No,
DAF?
you can open your DAF, right away from your phone with Daffodil and get started.
Wow. Amazing. Cody is our behind the scene magician with the tech. He had pulled up a question, which I think you've really well addressed, Sarah, but I want to give both Alex and Steve an opportunity. If Cody doesn't mind just pulling our question up, what are some of the DAF technology providers, administrators in the space that are leading the DAF innovation administration? So yes, I appreciate learning about Daffodil, knowing the work that Sarah and Blue are doing. And I want to kick the same question over to Alex and Steve so we can hear a little bit about what you guys are doing over at DAFshare.
Well, I'll kick it off and then I'll turn it over to Steve. But the first question is who's doing sort of the most in innovating in DAFs? And obviously, I think the companies represented on this call are so. And I think it's actually exciting because I think technology has, when you think of technology innovation and cutting edge, you generally don't follow that with nonprofits. And so you've got a lot.
We lost Alex for just a second, but I'm sure you'll pop back in. Steve, you know right where to pick up?
I guess I do, yes. He's actually out of the country, so he's got sounds like he has some connectivity issues. But so the technology. So what we found is that charities, and I trying to be generous here, charities are not very good at fundraising. At least most aren't. They're focused on mission. Smaller charities don't have the resources to have the kind of development staff that they need to meet their mission goals. As an example, we're working with a large charity out in Southern California. They've got over 100,000 donors, and they've got 4 development officers. So how many of those people do you think are going to have one-to-one contact in a given year, right? Mm-hmm. And charities are finding themselves in the position where they focus on major gifts. They've got maybe a small number of major gift donors,
right?
But it's a shrinking pool. Baby boomers and the silent generation are, I'm one of them. We are fading away, and we're not going to be here forever. And so, but the next generation of donors, they are looking for things. They are technology natives, and they're looking for something different in terms of the way they think about money, the way they manage money.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty of the technology. Our technology and what Daffodil is doing is it's scalable, and it addresses the desires and the way that younger donors look at philanthropy.
I love it. It's not something you have to wait to do until you're old and retired. It's democratized, it's easy, it's accessible. And I think in your case, maybe gamified. I know, Alex, I'm glad you're back because Steve picked up beautifully, but we didn't want you to lose your momentum there. So we'll let you pick up as well. Thanks, Steve.
No, and I did hear Steve, and I think he covered it well. I think one of the things that is fundamental to charities operating better and addressing their mission is it's almost taking the responsibility of fundraising and moving it to the donors themselves, and part of that, and obviously where I think, again, we're complementary to Daffodil, where there's discovery and things like that, we focus on community. We assume you already know who you're going to give to, but we want that to happen in plain sight. It's not just trust for the nonprofits, it's trust from the donors as well, so that they can see not just their gift, but the momentum they're building with smaller donors, with younger donors, with a almost a collaborative approach that isn't based on how many, to pick up on Steve's comment, how many calls can you make in a year if you're going to try to reach those? Well, you don't. So what they do is they focus on the big fish, and and almost strain relationships because they just want more money from fewer donors, when ultimately that's hurting their long-term possibilities. Like if you look at universities today, they lose touch, they forget about you. If you happen to be successful and there's a news article about you, they remind you that you're alumni and you should give to them.
Right.
And if they had connected with students who maybe it was a third-year medical student who didn't have a lot of money but wanted to give money to cancer research or whatever they happen to be in, and stayed in connection, not just by asking them for money, but putting them together with other donors, that person, when they become the surgeon and they have more money than time, they're going to be there for you. And instead it's a, well, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah. I mean, that psychological shift from
Yes.
I need to, this obligation versus opportunity I get to. I mean, that's huge. And that social proof of, oh, like you're doing that, let's do it together. That's powerful. And I think too, I imagine maybe not every family member, generationally is going to see eye to eye, but it is a great way to at least create the visibility in what the particular family members are passionate about, and maybe allows them to have their own avenue. Great. Yeah. Incredible. Well, thank you for the great question, Michael. Appreciate that. I mean, it's just amazing. I'm sure you guys have some awesome stories or examples of that you can share with the audience, and it will just help maybe everyone understand how they can get involved and how they can give. If anyone wants to share like a case study, you don't have to share names, obviously, for confidentiality.
Well, I'll kick it off. I would just encourage anybody that is interested in seeing sort of what's happening real time, go to DAFshare.com/feed. It's kind of a trick way. If you go to DAFshare, it's going to ask you to sign up, which we do encourage. But if you go to /feed, you can actually see the things happening. I mean, you mentioned the gamification. There's a bunch of people playing football. All that money goes into one pot. And this is where we're sort of treating a DAF differently.
Yeah.
But if someone wins outright, it goes to their charity. And we've had like 4 weeks of ties in a row. We've got people doing matching grants. You can see which ones are getting exhausted, which ones aren't. And you can really see that side of the technology working. So for us, it's easy. We don't have a case study. You could just go look and drill down into whatever you want to see because it's all public.
And by the way, setting up a matching grant takes about 15 seconds versus what it normally does with a foundation, which is months. So
wow. I mean, that's a huge argument for why. I mean, we can probably spend a lot more time on that since there are so many different ways to give. But yeah, happy to take the conversation that way. I mean, obviously the technology and a question I had personally is if I want to set one up, I mean, do I have to go down to particular bank? Can anyone set this up? Or it sounds like from the click of the button conversation, maybe even just doing this online.
Yeah, like you just shared there, Danielle, it's really as easy as a click of a button. DAFs are increasingly a tool in a family office, arsenal that can be used alongside a foundation or as a unique resource. But what I was thinking of with your question about case studies and ways that this has really become a dynamic resource for different families out there is what we've experienced at Daffodil is that using a more tech-native, dynamic solution for engaging a family in philanthropy, it goes from something static or something that might be more of a legacy process to something that can really involve different members of the group in their personal priorities or learning from other family members. It can be a great way to involve the younger generation in like a practice avenue for growing their own philanthropic impulses. And one way that we are really seeing this is in the growth of the narratives and understanding and storytelling of how philanthropy is more than just a tax strategy. It can also be a really strategic way to align your values and your interest with the rest of your portfolio.
Well, that's amazing. And I know the hardest challenge these families have is the succession and keeping, whether it be the actual family business. But I love that through this form of philanthropy, they can help achieve that connectivity and address one of the hardest challenges that family offices face.
To Sarah's point about sort of aligning around sort of impactful efforts, just generally with any sort of next generation person that wants to do well or do good. There's a local organization. I live in Miami. There's a local climate advocacy organization that recently announced that it partnered with a donor advised fund custodian that specializes in venture investing. Right. We kind of alluded to this earlier in the conversation. And what's interesting about that is their board obviously like approved this. They're allocating some of their endowment towards investing in climate technology startups. So as a 501c3 themselves that receives funding and does advocacy work and policy work with their 501c4 arm, they're also now supporting early stage for-profit companies and other organizations doing other types of work in the field. And that's just another way that you can leverage the donor advised fund structure to do more interesting stuff. And just support all the constituents of your organization and just kind of like whatever your mission is, like other ways to pursue your mission. So I thought that was a really cool announcement when I saw that last week.
Wow.
It wasn't us. We weren't the DAF partner because we don't do the venture side of things, but it's an organization based in New York and they do really cool stuff.
Well, and I think it's important, as professionals in this space to have an ecosystem, to have partners who maybe you're not doing one component, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you're not doing the venture arm, but for those maybe tuning in who are interested in getting more involved and learning, are there great conferences or organizations or groups or areas you recommend people check out?
Yeah, definitely. The DAF Giving Summit takes place every September. It kind of rotates around the country. It was most recently in DC. That is a great place to kind of connect and learn from all the DAF brains out there. And for anyone who's really interested in exploring their own expertise in the topic, and they maybe want to add that to their own education and training, the American College of Financial Services offers a certification in donor advised funds. It's a great program. It's a couple days per year. I think it is perhaps in Nashville this year, later in the spring.
Awesome. Anything anyone else wants to add?
I just want to throw it over to you, Danielle, because you've done such an amazing job of curating and connecting this ecosystem.
Yeah.
Just being involved with you, your events, even your product. I mean, like you said, having a network of people to, how are you doing this? What's working for you? What isn't? You've been a great advocate for it.
Oh, well, that means a lot to me. I mean, it's just so nice. I think I joke, I'm a natural connector. I tried to hook my older sister up with my husband before I realized what I was doing. Like, wait a minute. I mean, I like to connect people to a certain extent, but no, it's wonderful. It's, I'm curious by nature, and I've just been hearing so much about DAFs, but it was like, I need to know more. So I just have enjoyed getting to know, both of you, your groups, and really, I obviously have built a tech platform. I love seeing the way that technology can just help elevate these opportunities and bring them to others that wouldn't necessarily know their capacity for being able to participate and make it fun in the meantime. So no, this is a great conversation. So how do you guys see, I mean, it sounds, I've seen just in, the short time since I probably learned what a DAF was about a year ago. And since then, now it's kind of all I'm hearing about, but where do you see things going from here?
I, for one, think it'll be interesting. I mean, I think that I've been through this a number of times. I went through the .com boom and bust and all of those things. And right now with AI, with just cryptocurrency, it is such an interesting time to be alive.
Yeah.
And as cliche as it may be, the path will be defined by the bold. And, a lot of people want to sit on the sidelines and wait for a sure thing, but, it will be the people who jump on board early that really do have the greatest impact and change the most lives. I mean, that's at the end of the day, what we're all doing isn't different. It's philanthropy. It's literally somebody having, harvesting the crops and having more food than they and their family can eat and sharing it with others. And that's exactly what we live in today, but it's just changed a lot and it's accelerating. And I just see obviously there were some downsides to it, but even GoFundMe getting into the DAF space and things like that have drawn some drawn attention, both negative and positive.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's all good. I mean, I grew up in a time where I had to convince people the internet would catch on. So everybody seems to be a
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead, Blue. But that's where it was most recently. I was like, wow, this has gone really mainstream because I saw the option to use my DAF in GoFundMe. That's what it was. All right, go ahead, Blue.
I mean, even on this, your webinars, you talk a lot about the great wealth transfer. And to boil it down, we're talking about $84 trillion of wealth transferred over the next 20 years. 79% of that is going to go to direct heirs. 79 trillion of that, 12 trillion of it is expected to be allocated towards philanthropy. And this is all in the hands of the next generation that we keep talking about, that have different expectations of giving. They use different types of systems. They care more about like the understanding where their impact goes or their dollars go towards impact. Like it's just a completely different ballgame. Anybody who's worked in this field for the last 20 years and is going to be in it for the next 20 years, this is like the Rubicon. Like everything is going to be different. If you amortize that $12 trillion over the next 20 years linearly, which you can't do, it's probably going to be like backloaded. The amount of giving is going to double what last year's giving was in a total in the United States. So it's going to be night and day. So to answer your question about DAFs are just one vehicle that give a lot of flexibility and streamlined systems. All the systems are going to have to be streamlined to like take on that level of capital flow. So this is what we're talking about, is just one of those mechanisms, and there's just going to be a ton more out there. This is an opportunity to be in this space and facilitate a lot of this. I'm very excited about it.
I know that's such a inspiring and positive message, and it gave me goosebumps just hearing those statistics, and makes me think of one of my favorite mentors in the space, one of the greatest family office thought leaders, Ron Diamond, and he always talks about, the baseball innings and what inning are we in, and that's, we still have a long way to go, but I just think we have made so much progress, and it's such a pivotal and exciting time to be in this space. So
I think the numbers from Cerulean, the most recent ones, I think it's 124 trillion is what they're saying now, which is, that many zeros, it doesn't really matter, I guess, but one of the things that was interesting to me in those numbers is the initial inheritance is going to, a lot of that's going to go to spouses. So it's not even intergenerational necessarily. And what it's going to do is it'll be interesting to see, because a lot of those spouses, of course, are women, and it's going to empower women. All of a sudden, there's going to be a lot more women that have vast amounts of money, and they look at philanthropy differently than men do in general. And I think there's going to be a change in the direction of philanthropy based simply on that. And I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Absolutely. The things that we prioritize, the things that we care about, it's very exciting. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I did, we had the 84 trillion from Cerulli, and then yes, that just within like 1 year, they updated their reports, and it was like 124. It was like, oh my gosh, all that media we put out, we got to update our documents. We got to update the website. But how encouraging. Yeah. I apologize if there was a question that was just thrown up there.
It was a stat.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Our 124 trillion.
Very, very cool. Well, I know that there are definitely some questions in our audience. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything huge. You all are the experts. Are there questions that I haven't asked that I really should be touching on when we are having this conversation?
One of the things I think you could touch on, or that we could discuss briefly, is privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then the need for privacy and how technology enables privacy to be controlled by the donor in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of sending a check to a charity and getting on their mailing list, and all of a sudden next thing you know you're getting phone calls and getting harassed,
Yeah.
Technology allows you to hold a charity at arm's length if you want to.
Okay.
And the donor can then determine the level of privacy that they want or how much exposure they want to that charity. And that, I think, is really important, especially for families, wealthy families that are being inundated all the time with offers and people trying to sell them things.
No, that's very important.
I think it's an important thing distinction to talk about.
Yeah, in the current climate, especially in the US, a lot of families and donors are turning to DAFs for controlling how much information they share.
Yes.
The majority of DAF holders do disclose some amount of their information when they're making a distribution, but they're under no obligation to do that. So if you're thinking about a family foundation, there is a disclosure schedule that needs to happen, whereas with the DAF, you don't have that. And that can be especially important when you're considering different cause areas, different amounts. And like Steve was saying, if you really want to protect your own time and space and the amount of information that other organizations can use to contact you, that privacy piece is definitely on the rise and contributing to why DAFs are increasingly a very attractive option.
I saw a question earlier from Maine. Thank you, Maine, for being here. And we have an incredible global audience. And so this is a great question. Are DAFs something that have to do solely with American taxes and nonprofits?
Yeah, DAFs are actually a vehicle that's increasingly available worldwide. The structure and approach differs based on which market you're in. Canadian DAFs are a little different than American DAFs, but France, Singapore, the UK, there are donor advised funds and similar type of vehicles that are increasingly available worldwide.
Wow. And I'm sure technology is only going to help make that process easier and maybe more connected.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
One quick note, the transferability is pretty easy as well. So if anybody out there has like a large donor advised fund out of Fidelity or whatever and wants to explore the ecosystem of innovation that we've been talking about, it's usually zero cost to transfer some or all of your DAF from one platform to another. It's all within the 501c3 ecosystem. So it's pretty easy to do.
Love it. Love how easy, and excited to check out both Daffodil and DAFshare now in much more detail after this. You've definitely both piqued a lot of my interest. I can't believe how quickly an hour goes by. This has just been awesome. And I'm glad I wasn't sure how it would work with having all 5 of us on screen, but no, it was great. And all of you, thank you for contributing so much of your expertise and unique perspectives to today's conversation. And thank you to our audience just for the great questions and participation. I love seeing both familiar and new faces in the chat. Everything will be recorded. So after the event, both on YouTube and LinkedIn, the recording will be here. So if there are families or advisors you work with who would find this conversation helpful, please feel free to share. Next month, we'll have a really great lunch and learn all around generational wealth transfer and technology, just really kind of the problems surrounding next gen. We'll be featuring 2 new experts. And as a thank you to everyone who has joined us today, if you have not yet learned about what we've built at Family Office Access, we'd love to invite you over to familyofficeaccess.com. We have a special promo code LIVE20, 20% savings for anyone from this call who's interested in starting a membership with us. And yeah, we just appreciate the opportunity to learn collectively like this. And thank you, Sarah, Blue, Steve, and Alex, for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate it.
Until next time.